Hi, my name's Keziah, and this year my parents beat me, with a champagne bottle, at my brother's birthday, because I wouldn't hand over the deed to my $450,000 condo. But that wasn't the worst part. They'd already erased me from our family photos. They tried to sell my home without telling me, and when I fought back, they made a video calling me the traitor. I never thought justice would look like an empty house, or a folded napkin left behind. But maybe that's what happens when silence speaks louder than loyalty. Before we begin, what time is it where you are? And have you ever had to choose peace over people who share your blood? Tell me below, because this story doesn't end the way you think. It was a warm Sunday evening in San Antonio, the kind where twilight stretches long and golden across driveways and blooming oleanders. I pulled up to my parents' house just as the valet opened the driver's door. My Toyota sedan, scrubbed clean inside and out, looked wildly out of place next to the BMWs and Teslas lining the cul-de-sac. I stepped out, brushing off invisible dust from my simple navy dress. No designer label, no statement jewelry, just clean lines and a tiny pearl stud I'd had since college. I clutched a neatly wrapped box, a monogrammed pen set for Lazaro, and walked toward the front porch where laughter spilled out like champagne. The house had been transformed. String lights zigzagged across the yard, live jazz hummed in the background, and the aroma of cedar-planked salmon wafted through the air. My brother Lazaro, the oldest and brightest star in the Reynolds galaxy, was turning 40. The celebration was bigger than most weddings I'd been to. Inside, a young man in a tight vest and fitted slacks stood at a podium with a guest list. He smiled politely. Name? Keziah Reynolds, I said, adjusting the gift bag in my hand. He scanned the sheet, then paused. His finger trailed down a column. You're listed as +1 under the Reynolds family block. I blinked. Sorry, what? He turned the paper around, showing me. There it was, a carefully printed chart. Reynolds family, followed by individual names, Lazaro, Delora, Orville, Thessaly, even cousin Maxine and her 3 kids. Then at the bottom, in smaller font, +1 guest of family. I forced a smile. Guess I'm the lucky +1. He looked unsure. Would you like a different tag? I can handwrite it. It's fine, I said quickly. Really? I pinned the generic guest badge onto my dress right over my heart. It pulled slightly at the fabric. I moved through the house, nodding hellos, ignored just enough to remember I was out of orbit here. The ballroom doors were wide open. Crystal chandeliers dangled overhead like floating planets, casting diamonds of light across tables covered in silk. I scanned the place cards. My seat was near the back, table 18. I walked toward it slowly, heels tapping softly against marble. Table 18 was tucked behind a thick pillar, right next to the kitchen door, where servers came and went with trays clinking and the occasional shout of, "Hot plate!" My place setting was slightly off. The silverware crooked, the napkin, folded into a limp swan, drooped forward like it had given up halfway through the evening. I reached to adjust it, pausing as the paper-thin wing fluttered under the air from the swinging kitchen door. I sat down and exhaled. From my vantage point, I could barely see the head table, but I could hear everything. Laughter, toasts, the pop of another champagne bottle. Lazaro was being hailed from every direction. "Our golden boy!" someone shouted. A woman in stilettos leaned over to kiss his cheek. Delora stood beside him, beaming with the practiced grace of a political hostess. "This is our son," she repeated over and over to different circles of guests. "He just made regional VP in 4 years. Isn't that something?" No one noticed me. Orville, my father, did glance over once. He caught my eye across the crowd, offered a slow nod, not a greeting, just acknowledgement that I existed, and turned back to speak with his business partner. I picked up the water glass and sipped slowly, letting the chill anchor me. My hand brushed against the napkin again, that sad little swan, crumpled and lonely on fine china. Maybe they just forgot to list me properly. Maybe someone mixed up the chart, or maybe, just maybe, I was never meant to stand out here. A server leaned over to clear the seat beside me. It had remained empty all night. "That one taken?" she asked. I smiled. "No, it's all yours." The clinking of forks on glasses started, and the lights dimmed slightly as the spotlight illuminated the stage. A microphone screeched softly before settling. A voice, deep, familiar, spoke into the system. And now, a few words from someone very special to us. Please welcome, Keziah Reynolds. I froze. My name echoed through the speakers, but not the way I hoped. The applause was still trailing off when I stood up, hesitant, confused. I hadn't prepared anything. I didn't know why I was being called forward. As I walked toward the small stage, heels clicking in rhythm with my racing pulse, Delora gave me a smile I couldn't read. It was too polished to be warm. There was a microphone stand in the center and a spotlight just slightly too bright. I shaded my eyes, scanning the room for some kind of context. Lazaro gave me a nod from the main table, Thessaly's hand resting perfectly posed on his. Orville sat with one arm draped behind Delora, grinning like he was watching a show he already knew the ending to. I reached the mic, waiting for someone to hand me a card, a script, anything. Nothing. Then the screen behind me lit up. A video montage started rolling. First, a picture of Lazaro in a Little League uniform holding a bat bigger than his arms. Then a middle school science fair, him pointing to a cardboard volcano. High school graduation, college internship, a shot of him shaking hands with the mayor. Then blueprints, his first architecture project. Narration began. My mother's voice. From the very beginning, Lazaro was destined for greatness. He was the light in every room, our foundation, our pride. Then Orville chimed in. We always knew he had that spark, the kind of brilliance you don't teach. It's born in you. My jaw tightened. I watched the video silently, hands clasped in front of me, smiling because the alternative would be giving them a reason to say I was sensitive. Not once did they mention the $75,000 loan I wired Lazaro during his startup years. The weekends I helped him rebuild client decks when his software crashed. The night I slept on the floor of his half-built showroom so the carpet installer wouldn't bail. There was no trace of me in this history they had edited for the crowd. The video ended with a splash of gold cursive, a legacy in the making. Applause. People clapped politely, some even enthusiastically. I nodded faintly and turned back toward the mic. Delora rose from her seat, clapping as she approached. And now, she said brightly, a few words from the ever-thoughtful little sister. I blinked. So that's what this was. A staged speech. A performance they hadn't rehearsed me for. I glanced down at my dress, suddenly self-conscious. My hands were sweating. I leaned into the mic. It's a beautiful night, I began. And Lazaro, you've always had a gift for making the room light up around you. That's when she did it. Delora interrupted me, laughing like we were all in on the same joke. Oh, honey, tell them. Wouldn't it be the perfect gift if you handed them the condo key tonight? The room stilled. It wasn't the kind of silence that descends naturally. It was the air being sucked out of a room all at once. Someone in the back coughed. A phone camera clicked. My throat dried. I looked at her, trying to figure out if she'd lost her mind or if this was some sort of test. What? I asked quietly, not into the mic, just to her. She kept smiling. The place in Austin, that lovely 2-bedroom condo you've got, you're always traveling for work, and Thessaly and Lazaro are newlyweds. It just makes sense. Orville chimed in from his seat, voice booming. Come on, Kez, it's just a formality. You don't need all that space. It's not like you're using the guest room. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a maneuver, one designed to leave no room for a no, without making me look ungrateful. The crowd wasn't sure how to respond. Eyes darted, heads turned. Lazaro looked down at his plate. Thessaly's lips tightened. She didn't look surprised. This wasn't agreed on, I said into the mic, my voice suddenly sharper than I expected. The room reacted. A few gasps, some of sympathy, others of embarrassment. Delora waved a hand, still smiling like this was an improv act. Don't be dramatic, sweetie. It's just a gesture, a symbol of love. I could feel my chest tightening. Every cell in my body screamed for me to defend myself, to list every sacrifice, every loan, every family bill I'd covered when Lazaro's firm hit a dry spell. But I didn't. Instead, I stared at my mother. at the way her face was stretched into a mask of charm, at the way her eyes watched me not with affection but calculation. This was planned. Down to the exact moment. The audience fidgeted. Someone whispered, "That's bold." A woman nearby muttered to her friend, "She's not going to say no in front of everyone, right?" I set the mic down gently. It made a soft thud. My hand trembled slightly as I smoothed my skirt. And then I smiled, quiet, contained. The kind of smile that says, "I see you, and I will remember everything." I stepped off the stage, not knowing that the worst was still waiting behind the dessert table. I hadn't made it 3 steps off the stage when I spotted Orville waiting by the dessert table, arms stiff at his sides, his jaw tight. He wasn't looking at the cake or the guests. He was staring at me, and that was never a good sign. Delora stood just behind him, a champagne flute in hand, whispering something under her breath. From her expression, it wasn't concern, it was disgust. "She just embarrassed us," she muttered to him, thinking I wouldn't hear. Or maybe hoping I would. I slowed, not because I was afraid, but because something in the air told me I was about to be cornered. I scanned for a safe face. Thessaly? She looked away. Lazaro? He was sipping something dark and pretending I didn't exist. The white marble floor beneath my heels was pristine, the kind of polished that makes your own reflection feel like a stranger. Orville stepped forward and grabbed the neck of the champagne bottle on the table. I assumed he was reaching for a refill until he turned fast and without a word swung it sideways. The base caught me just above my temple, a crack, then white. Not a full blackout, more like a camera flash that never turned off. I staggered, vision swimming. There was a pressure, a warmth crawling down the side of my face, and then gasps. I heard someone whisper, "Oh my God." Another voice. "Did he just—" Phones raised. Not one hand reached out. Blood hit the marble like red ink on snow. "You ungrateful brat!" Delora spat, not even lowering her voice. "We brought you into our home, gave you everything." I couldn't even process it. My body was moving before my mind caught up. I bent slightly, pressing my palm to the side of my head. The pain was sharp, yes, but the humiliation scorched. A few guests stepped back. No one stepped forward. Jonah, my cousin on my dad's side, the one who always smelled like motor oil, shouted, "Someone call the police!" His voice cracked, but even he didn't move toward me. I straightened slowly, trying not to show the shake in my knees. My dress, pale blue, was already streaked with red. The marble shimmered beneath me, dizzying. "Is she okay?" a woman whispered near the fruit table. "She's being dramatic, right?" "No," someone else answered flatly. "That man hit her. I got it on video." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even raise my voice. I walked. Through the stunned crowd, past Lazaro, who looked down at his plate like it was suddenly the most fascinating thing in the world. Thessaly touched his arm, but she didn't get up. Outside, the night was quiet. No one followed. I called an Uber with trembling fingers. Blood had crusted along my jawline by the time the driver pulled up. He looked nervous. "You all right, ma'am?" "Hospital," I said simply. At the ER, the fluorescent lights made everything feel colder. I filled out my own form, smearing ink with the edge of my bandage. The nurse was gentle, asking questions in a voice like she was used to women showing up alone. "Anyone coming to stay with you?" I shook my head. "No, just me." She gave a nod that said she understood more than she let on. "You're not the first." I leaned back on the stiff cot as she pressed gauze to my head. The ceiling tiles were the color of toothpaste, scrubbed and sterile. That's when it hit me. Not the pain, not the embarrassment, but the clarity. That was the last time I showed up for any of them. By the time I got back to Leah's place that night, everything ached. My scalp throbbed with each heartbeat, the dull pulse reminding me of how fast things had unraveled. She'd left the guest room light on, with a soft towel laid out beside the bed and a warm mug of chamomile tea on the dresser. I didn't touch it. I just sank into the sheets, shoes still on, and closed my eyes. Not to sleep, but to shut out the memory of glass clinking and judgmental eyes. Morning came too soon, filtered through linen curtains and the chirping of a neighbor's sprinkler system sputtering to life. I blinked at the unfamiliar ceiling, momentarily forgetting where I was. Then my head gave a sharp throb, and everything came rushing back. I reached for my phone. Dozens of notifications lit up the screen. None were from family, not even Lazaro, not even to pretend concern. There were messages from old co-workers who had seen a clip online. Yes, someone had uploaded the moment. A shaky recording, a gasp from the crowd, my body stumbling sideways with red blossoming at my temple. I pressed delete, again and again. But my hands kept shaking. I tried to find some normalcy and routine. Showered, brushed my teeth slowly, wincing each time I tilted my head. Then I reached into my purse to grab my apartment key. Just a little mental exercise, make sure I was still grounded, still in control. But something was off. My wallet was there, my phone, lip balm, receipts, even the half-eaten protein bar I forgot about last week. But not the spare condo key, the one I always kept clipped to the side pocket. I emptied the bag onto the bed, piece by piece. Nothing. That's when it hit me. A week ago, after a family dinner in Westlake, Orville had scooped up my bag by mistake, or so he said. Thought it was your mother's, he'd shrugged as he handed it back with a sheepish grin. I hadn't thought twice about it, until now. The vibration of an incoming call startled me. Unknown number. I answered, more out of instinct than curiosity. Hi, Miss Keziah. This is Jeanette from HomeQuest Realty. Just confirming our 2 p.m. appointment for the walkthrough today at your condo. We'll meet at the entrance unless you'd prefer to use the lockbox. My stomach dropped. I didn't schedule anything, I said, my voice hoarse. Oh? Jeanette sounded confused, flipping through something on her end. It's scheduled under your name. A Mr. Orville Sullivan was listed as the cosigner, but the listing account was under your property title. I couldn't breathe. I never listed my condo. There was a pause. Would you like to cancel the showing then? I hung up. For a moment, all I could do was sit at the edge of the bed, elbows on my knees, phone in one hand, my other hand gripping the bedsheet like it might keep me from slipping into a free fall. They didn't just try to humiliate me. They were trying to erase me, piece by piece. I opened my laptop and stared at the screen, the cursor blinking like it was daring me to act. Then I opened a blank email. To marlo.steinberg@lawfirmco.com. Subject urgent. Hi Marlo, we met briefly last fall at the networking brunch. I'm hoping you remember me. I think my parents are trying to steal my home. I don't have proof yet, but I just received a call from a realtor about a walkthrough I never scheduled. They have a key I didn't authorize. Can we talk? Keziah Sullivan. I hit send, then grabbed my coat. By noon, I was standing outside my condo in East Austin with a locksmith, the sun beating down hard on the back of my neck. The man in coveralls nodded toward the doorknob. Someone's been in and out. The scratches are fresh, like they didn't know the exact placement of the key. Can you change the locks? I asked. Absolutely, he replied. Want to add a deadbolt too? I nodded. As he got to work, I leaned against the hallway wall, eyes fixed on the fine scratches near the handle. Not a break-in, no signs of brute force, just access, familiar, casual access, the kind that made your skin crawl. I didn't sleep much that night. The locksmith had left around 8, and I sat on the couch in silence, the scent of metal and lubricant still lingering in the air. I reheated leftover soup, barely touched it, then tossed and turned for hours. When morning finally came, my phone buzzed softly on the counter beside my keys. A new email from Delora Sullivan. Subject: Let's talk, Keziah. We love you. This has gone far enough. Please come by the house this afternoon. No guests, just us. Let's fix this. Mom. I stared at it longer than I should have. It wasn't rage that bubbled up. It was something quieter, warmer even, a sliver of that desperate hope I hadn't fully killed off yet, that maybe, just maybe, they wanted to talk, like family. By 2:15, I was pulling into their driveway. The front lawn looked as it always did, meticulous, with solar lights lining the flower beds and a porch swing that hadn't creaked in years. But the air felt off, too rehearsed. Delora opened the door before I knocked, arms already outstretched like she'd sensed my hesitation. Keziah, baby, she said, pulling me into a gentle hug that felt 3 degrees too cold. "Thank you for coming." I stepped inside. The living room had been staged. That's the only word for it. Fresh orchids on the coffee table, lemon tea set out with my favorite shortbread cookies, framed photos I hadn't seen in years, me and Lazaro at the lake when we were kids, that blurry one of me at my high school debate finals. Even the lighting was perfect, soft, inviting. Lazaro sat on the armrest of the couch, hands folded, lips pressed in a straight line. He looked up but didn't speak. Thessaly wasn't there. "Just us," Delora said again, gesturing to the plush chair I used to sit in when we opened Christmas presents. "We wanted to make things right." I didn't sit. Orville emerged from the hallway carrying a manila envelope. He gave me a look I couldn't read, somewhere between calm and smug. "We've been thinking," he said, "about how to keep things fair and clear. We don't want more misunderstandings, so we drafted something." He offered the envelope like it was a peace offering. "What is it?" I asked, though a part of me already knew. "Just something to help define family boundaries," he replied smoothly. "You know, so no one gets hurt again." I opened it slowly. The paper inside was thick, formal, legal. The words "deed transfer agreement" glared back at me in bold. The rest was cloaked in neutral phrasing: asset clarification, internal arrangement, mutual understanding. My chest tightened. I flipped to the signature line. "You're asking me to sign away the condo." Delora smiled, folding her hands in her lap. "It's just paperwork, sweetheart. A formality. You don't even need all that space alone." "You're not even reading it," Orville added. "Don't you trust us?" The room suddenly felt smaller, the air denser. I closed the folder carefully and set it back on the coffee table, just to the left of the tea tray. "You set this up like a reconciliation," I said, my voice quiet but steady. "The flowers, the cookies, the old photos, like you were inviting me home." Delora tilted her head. "We are." "No," I said. "You're inviting me to hand over the last piece of myself you don't already control." Orville's mouth twitched. "That's not what this is." I took a slow step back, surveying the room one more time. This wasn't peace. This was theater. I turned to the door. "I'm not signing anything," I said. "Not now. Not ever. This is theft with orchids on the side." Lazaro finally spoke. "It's just property, Keziah." I looked over my shoulder at him. "It's not about property. It's about what you think I'm worth." No one followed me out. I walked straight to my car, got in, and shut the door before the first tear could slip down my cheek. I didn't wipe it away. I just let it fall as I dialed Marlowe's number. He answered on the second ring. "Keziah? I'm ready to go all in," I said. "File everything." The next morning, I didn't wake to sunlight or the scent of coffee. I woke to silence, thick and full-bodied. The kind of silence that doesn't settle, it presses. I made myself a cup of black tea and sat by the kitchen window, letting it steep longer than usual. The condensation on the glass blurred the view outside, like it was trying to spare me the sharp outlines of a world that had shifted overnight. At 9:32 a.m., I parked outside Marlowe's office. Downtown was already humming, but inside the building it was cold and still. Marlowe met me with a nod and a folder already in hand. "I reviewed everything last night," he said. "They've left a mess, but here's the good news. You still hold the deed to the house they're living in." I blinked. "You're sure?" He flipped to the second page, tapping the signature line with his pen. "You bought it in 2010, remember? Foreclosure rescue. They never transferred it back. They've been living there on assumption and memory." I leaned back in the chair, letting the information settle like warm oil. "I gave them a lifeline," I murmured. "They turned it into a noose." He nodded slowly, offering me a choice without words. I took the pen. Back at home, I didn't feel triumph, just direction. I wasn't driven by rage. I had already given them enough of my life through raw emotion. This was surgical, quiet, final. Marlowe filed the notice to vacate within hours. We didn't notify them. There were no dramatic warnings, no shouting matches in parking lots, no staged interventions with extended family clapping like a live audience. This wasn't TV. This was real life. And real life hits back in envelopes. 3 days later, the sheriff delivered the eviction order. I didn't see it happen in person, but Lazaro, ever the online documentarian of life's milestones, captured it on a grainy home security camera and uploaded it to our extended family group chat like a cry for help. The footage showed Orville opening the front door in a wrinkled bathrobe, holding a half-eaten piece of toast, blinking at the man in uniform like he'd woken in someone else's life. Delora was behind him, mouth slightly open, frozen mid-sip from a porcelain mug. The officer handed them a sealed envelope and spoke too softly for the mic to catch, but the reaction needed no audio. Her body stiffened. Orville snatched the paper, skimmed it, and slapped it against the wall. The video cut off just before she shouted something at the officer, something I wouldn't have heard even if it had played. I watched it once, then once more, then closed the app. That night, I sat in my condo, lights off, sipping chamomile with honey. My phone face down, the screen black. No music, no Netflix, just quiet. The world outside continued moving. Cars rushed past, a dog barked in the distance, and someone played jazz on a balcony a block away. But inside, time felt still. I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I didn't toast the air. I just sat there and breathed. Sometimes justice doesn't look like standing over someone. Sometimes it looks like choosing not to stand next to them ever again. My phone buzzed once. I almost ignored it. Then I turned it over. A message from Thessaly, only one line. "They've done worse than you know." Thessaly's message stared back at me from the dim screen, glowing like a confession under a spotlight. I tapped the image attached, a dusty family photo album, its leather binding fraying at the edges. She had taken a picture of it spread open across her lap, page after page, and not a single photo of me. No childhood birthdays, no graduation, not even one of those awkward Christmas snapshots with the ugly sweaters Mom insisted on. It was like someone had surgically removed me from the timeline. Her text followed seconds later. "They've been erasing you for years, even from memory." I blinked. Once, twice, then whispered out loud to no one, "So I wasn't just imagining it." And somehow that quiet validation struck harder than all the blows before. I didn't respond right away. I just sat there staring at the image, letting the cold truth sink into the soft tissue of memory. I wasn't just overlooked. I was deliberately erased, rewritten out of my own family's narrative. I finally typed, "Thank you for showing me what I always felt but couldn't prove." The next morning, I woke up with a strange stillness, the kind you feel right before a storm, not outside, but within. I didn't know why I checked social media. Maybe I already sensed the next hit coming. Delora had posted a video. At first, I didn't even recognize the voice in it, but it was mine. A clipped version of my toast at Lazaro's party. Not the whole speech, just the part where my voice cracked, where I said, "This wasn't agreed on." It was spliced between images of Lazaro smiling with balloons, of me standing stiff and awkward. The caption, "We raised her with love. We never expected betrayal." Hashtag spilled beneath it like spilled wine. Family matters, broken hearts. Daughter of stranger. I didn't click the comments, but the preview said enough. Ungrateful. We need the whole story. Some kids are just never satisfied. They weren't just rewriting the past anymore. They were building a whole new fiction, with me cast as villain. My hands were steady. That surprised me. I thought I'd be shaking again. Instead, I opened my Dropbox account. I uploaded everything. Dated wire transfers from my account to theirs, the original condo deed, email exchanges about the loan I gave Lazaro. Even a saved voicemail from Mom, asking if I could just cover the mortgage this one time. No commentary, no hashtags, no call to arms, just a folder named Truth, if you care to see it. Then I shut the laptop. I didn't need to watch it go viral, or not. That wasn't the point. The point was, I didn't owe them silence anymore. I made tea, sat in the kitchen with the blinds half drawn, let the sun warm the back of my hand as I cupped the mug, and for the first time in days, I didn't feel like I had to brace for the next blow. That afternoon, I went through an old storage bin I hadn't touched in years. Tucked beneath a faded t-shirt from college was my own photo album, one I'd made in high school, long before I knew they'd someday erase me. I flipped through it slowly. There I was, crooked teeth, band concert uniform, that hideous floral prom dress I'd begged Mom not to let me wear. Every picture was proof I had existed, that I belonged, if not to them, then at least to myself. And in the middle of the book, I found something I forgot I'd even kept. A sticky note in Dad's handwriting from when I aced my first college paper. Kez, knew you had it in you. Proud of you, kid. Dad? I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I closed the album, slid it back into the bin, and said to the empty kitchen, "You did love me once, but that doesn't excuse who you are now." That evening, I received a message from a name I hadn't seen in years. My Uncle Marvin, Mom's older brother. His text read simply, "Saw the folder. About time someone told the truth. If you need a witness, I'm here." I stared at it for a long time. Maybe the glass house didn't shatter all at once. Maybe it was breaking, pane by pane, with each person who finally chose to look past the stories and see what was real. The next morning, I drove down the familiar road without music. Just the hum of the tires and the occasional street light flickering past the windshield. I didn't rush. There was nothing left to race toward, and nothing left to avoid. By the time I pulled up to the house, the moving truck was already there. Parked diagonally across the driveway, its back door wide open, waiting. The realtor stood by the gate, clipboard in hand, her tone brisk and professional as she nodded to the workers hauling boxes from the garage. They weren't my parents' boxes. Those had been taken or abandoned days ago when the eviction order was served. What remained were leftovers, objects stripped of meaning. I stepped out of my car and shut the door gently. I didn't need force anymore. That part of me had quieted. As I approached the front steps, the air felt heavier than it should have. The weight of a place that once held laughter and casserole pans, Sunday crossword puzzles, and back-to-school photos taped to the fridge. Now it held only the echo of absence. Inside, the walls were bare. No photos, no paintings, not even the dust left behind by picture frames. The light filtering through the blinds landed flat against the empty floor like it was too tired to glow. I walked through slowly. No tour needed. I knew every inch. The scratch on the kitchen cabinet Dad had sworn he'd fix. The corner of the living room where I used to build forts out of pillows. The chipped tile in the hallway bathroom Mom blamed on contractor error. But I knew Lazaro had dropped a hairdryer. It was all still here. And yet it wasn't. Then I saw it. On the kitchen counter. A letter with my name on it. It wasn't handwritten. Just my name printed in a stiff, indifferent font, like a utility bill or a jury summons. I opened it with a flat palm, not expecting kindness. I wasn't wrong. This was never your home anyway. That was it. No signature, no attempt at apology, just a parting shot on a piece of standard printer paper. I folded it once, then again, and tucked it into my coat pocket without reading it a second time. I didn't flinch. As I turned to leave, something made me pause at the hallway cabinet. A small wooden door, the kind no one ever really used, tucked beneath the stairs. I hesitated, then opened it. A single shoebox sat inside, unmarked, covered in a fine layer of dust. I brought it to the kitchen island and lifted the lid slowly. Inside was a photograph. I was 8, hair in uneven pigtails, missing a front tooth, holding a science trophy taller than my arms could wrap around. I'd forgotten about that day. I had won first place for a homemade volcano that actually erupted with foam and vinegar. No one else was in the photo. I remember standing on stage alone. Behind that picture, folded carefully like a pressed flower, was one of my swan-shaped napkins. It wasn't a replica. It was one of mine, from that dinner party, the one they'd left crooked on the table by the kitchen door, the same one I had straightened with shaking hands, trying to feel like I belonged. I didn't know what it meant that they kept it. Maybe nothing. Maybe guilt. Maybe someone had meant to throw it out and just forgot. But it was still here, and it was mine. I closed the lid and held it to my chest for a moment. Just one. Then I stepped outside and handed it to the realtor. "This stays with me." She nodded without asking. Sometimes people know when a thing carries more than dust. As I walked to my car, I didn't look back. Not at the porch, not at the roof I once helped patch, not even at the door they used to stand in every Thanksgiving waving goodbye with empty hands. I didn't need to. That night, back in my condo, the lights were off. I sat in the kitchen with the box beside me, the swan napkin in my lap, my fingers smoothing its edges. My phone buzzed, a message from Marlo. "The sale's final, funds wired, you're free." I stared at the words for a long time, not because I didn't believe them, but because part of me didn't remember what freedom felt like. Then I looked at the swan, the same folds, the same edges, the same paper. I whispered into the quiet, "They gave me back everything, by trying to take it all." The morning light streamed through my condo windows like it hadn't in years, clean, calm, unobstructed. I set the folded swan napkin gently at the center of the dining table, the same one I had found in that forgotten cabinet. That soft, creased linen felt like a whisper from an older version of myself, a quiet promise kept, not by them, but by me. The room around me was still. My kitchen smelled of cinnamon and fresh polish. For the first time, I wasn't waiting on a call, an apology, or permission to feel peace. The silence didn't press on me anymore. It wrapped around me like a soft shawl. Then the envelope came. Tucked in a pile of mail, it was cream-colored and thick. My name handwritten in cursive across the front. I recognized Thessaly's handwriting before I even opened it. Inside, a baby shower invitation, formal, tasteful. And then, at the bottom, a quick scrawl. "I'm sorry, I didn't know how far they went. You deserved better. Thessaly." No flourish, no excuses, just acknowledgement. And a weight I hadn't realized I was still carrying lifted slightly. I stared at the card for a long while. Not out of indecision, just reflection. A part of me wanted to tear it up. Another part, a wiser, more weathered part, knew the cost of burning bridges for smoke that wouldn't warm me anyway. So instead, I wrote a check to the local women's shelter. In the memo line, I wrote, "In honor of a new beginning." And I didn't attend the shower. Some cycles don't need to end with screaming. Some stories don't require fire. Silence, when chosen, is its own revolution. That evening, I cooked dinner. Just a simple pasta dish with garlic and thyme. I set 2 plates, not out of habit, but intention. Amina arrived 15 minutes later, her arms full, a bottle of wine in one and a tiny orchid in the other. "You need more green in here," she said, setting it by the window like she'd always lived here. We ate slowly, like people who had nothing to prove to time. The conversation wandered from work to books to a show she swore I'd love and I swore I'd never start. At some point, I looked at the swan on my table. It wasn't fancy. Its edges were soft now, the crease not as crisp as the ones I used to fold for family parties, trying to impress people who never truly saw me. But this one sat alone. And it was enough. I thought about the girl I used to be, hiding in corners at events, smiling too wide when ignored, folding napkins like origami shields. And I thought about the woman I had become, not cold, not cruel, just complete. I turned to Amina, refilled our glasses, and raised mine slightly. "To building our own tables," I said. She clinked her glass to mine. "And never begging for a seat again." That night, I didn't think about what they lost. I thought about what I reclaimed. Not just property or dignity, but presence, identity. A quiet kind of power no eviction or lie could ever touch again. And that, I decided, was worth more than any inheritance they ever withheld. Sometimes the deepest wounds come not from strangers, but from the people who raised us. This story isn't just about betrayal. It's about reclaiming your voice, your space, and your peace. Have you ever had to walk away from family to protect your soul? Tell me in the comments.